Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Hello and welcome to another HerbWorks podcast. This is Roger Drummer, and today's topic is eating vegans. Now, just so we're not confused here, I'm not talking about eating a vegan diet. I'm talking about eating vegans. In other words, eating meat. Because most animals that you eat are vegans. And so that's what I want to talk about today. It's kind of like exploring meat from a vegetarian perspective. And why do I want to talk about this? Well, diets are really topics of conversation with almost everyone. And everyone seems to be on some sort of a diet. And I myself have been on a pretty much vegetarian diet since I was in my around 19 years of age or so. And so I know a little bit about diets and how they affect your body, and I think I've been through every phase and craze of all the diets that exist. But the main diet that I adhered to was the vegetarian diet. So I'm not someone who eats meat or even likes the idea of eating meat. But when I had chronic fatigue, this was back when I was in my 30s, maybe early 40s. When I had chronic fatigue, I was talked into trying some beef as a medicine. Now that gave it a little bit of a different idea when thinking about it as a medicine. In other words, thinking about it as something temporary to help you fix something and not as a normal food that you would have in your diet. So I did give it a try. I ate beef for about a week. I did get some different energy out of it. I noticed it on a couple of occasions, quite a profound boost to my physical energy. But I didn't really like eating meat, so I didn't continue with that. I did add some fish for a few years, a couple times a week, and then I fell back into my vegetarian diet. And I'm more of a lacto-avos, meaning that I eat cheese, I have some dairy products, I consume eggs. Never really consume milk unless it's part of something that has to be cooked in as an ingredient. So milk was never a big issue with me. But I did like certain cheeses, and I continue to like certain cheeses, although I don't consume very much of them at all. And I do consume eggs. Today I'm more of a pescatarian, meaning that I include fish in my diet and probably have fish 3 to 4 times a week. Depending on the week, actually. It's not that I'm always working it into my diet, but it just turns out there's certain things I've adapted. My wife loves it, and we tend to eat together, obviously, so I end up having fish. So it's part of my diet. But today I want to talk about something I've tried in the last month and share that information with you. You might find it, interesting, something to think about. And you might want to try it out. Maybe you're a vegetarian and you're thinking about changing your diet. The thing about diets, especially the vegan diet and the vegetarian diet, is that it becomes almost like a religion. You really aren't into it so much for the diet as much as you are because it becomes part of your personality. And I know this is true with the vegan diet a lot. It's almost like they've adapted a religion, and it's a huge part of who they are. I have this thing with food. I often tell people, what if you could never tell anyone what you actually eat? What if you could never say that you were a vegetarian, a vegan, a carnivore, a pescatarian, or any of the other little breakdowns of diet fads? What if you could not identify at all with a dietary pattern? Who would you be? What would your main part of your personality that you would share with people? Think about it. Diets come down to being a big part of who we are and how we actually interact with people and share information. And I find it kind of strange that by telling someone what I eat, I get shoved into a category a pretty broad category that is used to define me in every other situation in life. So today, what I'm going to talk about is my foray into eating meat, because I've been eating meat for the last month. And I started it because of my experience when I had chronic fatigue. I seemed to get a bigger boost of energy. And right now I have some extra stressors in my life, some extra workload, a lot of things I'm dealing with. And, I work out, I do a lot of activity for somebody my age. And I just thought I'd see if I could get a boost or a different effect to my own personal energy from eating meat. Now, this wasn't an easy decision for me, because I also have a spiritual practice, which basically one of the stipulations of that is that you eat a vegetarian diet. Now, that might sound weird to some people, but it's all about energy. And with my particular practice, I do something which moves energy around my body. And meat tends to be very heavy and create blockages in certain areas where you would want energy to move. And so that's as simple as an explanation as I can give. Your body becomes a little clearer energetically, and energy seems to move much freer. And so that's one of the aspects of why you want to be on a vegetarian diet. The other one is just because you're on a spiritual path, and killing animals is not considered a high form of living. And so this is the big thing with vegans too. Killing animals to sustain yourself just isn't something that they can pretty much align with. And so they're against all forms of using animals. And that's why they're against eggs. They're against dairy products. They're against anything that has to do with animals and animals being mistreated. And I see their point on that. It's a great little ethical stance, as long as you don't take it too far. I just can't really warm up to the fact that the Swiss cheese I might have ate was from an animal that wasn't treated properly. But that's just me, Anyway, about a month ago, I realized I just needed some more energy, and I had a bunch of major stressors happening in my life, and I thought I'd try to give my body a little oomph. So I went out and I thought I was going to go buy some grass-fed beef. And it had been probably, it's got to be at least 25 years since I've had beef. And so I went to the store, and lo and behold, in the meat counter, they had bison, which was grass-fed. And I thought, well, hey, I've never had bison. If I'm going to eat meat, I'll try that. So I took it home, and, it comes in little patties, and there's 3 of them. So in the next 2 weeks, I ate 3 patties of bison. Now, I wouldn't say that I really enjoyed it or that it tasted any different than what I remember beef tasted like, but it's been a long time. And I can't say that I really got much out of it. I can't say that I really got the oomph out of it. Each patty had around 21 grams of protein. It was measured out. It was pretty handy the way that it came, that I didn't have to mess with it. I didn't have to play with it, didn't have to touch it much, put it in a skillet. And so all these other things that you hate about meat when you've been a vegetarian for a very long time. And it does look like a piece of flesh, so it wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me to do. But I did it. I ate it. It wasn't bad. I have to tell you, I had absolutely no digestive problems with eating it. This is something that cracks me up, because back when I had chronic fatigue, I hadn't eaten meat for 10 years. Approximately 10 years. And so if you read up on any of the literature in the health world, and especially literature coming out of the vegetarian world, one of the things they tell you about is how bad or how hard it is to digest meat. In fact, that's the original reason I became a vegetarian. It wasn't because I had some idea that I wanted to be healthier, or that it was better for the planet, or better for anything in general. I just thought, because I read a book on running, and I was just getting into running, and this book was The Book of Running, original title, by Jim Fixx, and he talked about how he had friends who could eat an entire meal, a vegetarian meal, and 2 hours later be out running and go run 20 miles. and how he couldn't do that because his cheeseburger, fries, and milkshake that he usually consumed sat in his gut so heavy that he would get cramps and he just couldn't do it. So that was kind of what, got me to thinking if I changed my diet, I wouldn't have these long periods of time where I couldn't just get up and go out and run 5 or 6 miles because I was really getting into running. And so that's how I got into it, and it changed my life. It started me on that path of becoming aware of food, aware of where it comes from, aware of what they spray on it, how it's grown, the whole process. And that's kind of evolved to what my diet is today, which is, pretty close to a vegetarian diet most of the time. But I'm very aware of what I put into my body as far as the diet is concerned. I'm aware of how food is grown, what they spray on it, what they don't spray on it, how things are treated. The whole process fascinates me. I'm really into food. So I tried the bison burger, and I would have to admit I really didn't notice much from it at all. So I went a couple weeks after that little process and decided, well, that was interesting, but I didn't get out of it what I thought I wanted to get out of it. And then one day I was in the store again shopping for groceries, because I am the main guy that buys groceries for this family. And so I saw that they had New Zealand lamb, ground up, frozen. And I thought, well, lamb is really clean. And I remember back when I've had that, again, decades ago, that it was very warming. And vegetarians tend to start to get cool body temperature. And I had a little bit of low thyroid. I'm going to try some lamb. So I took that home. And again, I measured it out exactly. So I got 3 patties out of a pack, and it had the exact amount of protein, almost the exact makeup as the bison. So I tried that, and I have to admit, I did get some oomph out of that. I actually felt better after doing that, and which got me to thinking about it. And so I had 3 different patties, and I consumed that within 1 week. So usually when I do this, I do it 3 days in a row. So one meal out of those 3 days, I'll have 1 patty of lamb, usually a large salad with it, a bunch of vegetables, a lot of things that I'm hoping are clean enough and green enough to offset the negative effects of what a lot of people say meat has in your system. Whether or not any of that's true, I don't know. But the reality is I always sit down with a really healthy meal to have with this. And so it becomes a very, very healthy meal. And there's probably nothing unhealthy about eating lamb, but in the back of my mind, because I've been a vegetarian for so long, that I'm kind of leery about eating this. But I have to admit, I did feel better on it. Good enough that I thought I might want to do a little bit of experiment with this. And so I waited another 7 or 8 days because, I'm just not into eating meat every day. I don't eat meat. Except for on my little experiments. So I went back and bought another package of it. But this time I did something completely different. And this fascinated me. I just cut it in half. So instead of having this portion of meat that's around 21 to 25 grams of protein, I had a bigger portion, which was maybe 38 grams, much bigger. The whole thing's divided into half. So I'm eating, before I prepare it, it was probably a half pound of meat. Now, this is very fascinating. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that if you read most literature, if you're reading about people that write about protein and consuming of animal products, they're usually telling you to keep your consumption down to 25 grams at a time. And the reason for this is that there's an enzyme that your body produces, or a pathway, it's called the mTOR pathway, which stimulates the growth and production of cancer cells when you consume too much protein at one time. And so everybody tries to fit within that parameter, at least the people that write about it and study about it. And so that's what I was trying to do. But what I noticed is that when I upped my consumption to that bigger piece of meat and had the exact same meal with it, I got a really big boost in my energy. In fact, I felt more solid, I felt more grounded, And I felt very sustained for a long period of time on the day that I did that, which led me to believe that there's a lot of reason or validity to just eating a bigger piece of meat when you actually do it. And it made me almost laugh because, I do nutritional counseling and people ask me about beef and I say, well, if you like it, it makes you feel good, always restrict it to this small amount and have all these other foods with it. And now I'm kind of rethinking that because, well, what is the reason people like to eat meat? Why do they eat it? Obviously, they want energy. They want to feel better. And what I noticed just in the little experiment that I did, that when I had the meal with a larger piece, I felt really sustained. In fact, I usually would eat this as my first meal a day around 11:30 or noon, somewhere around there. And generally, I'm someone that never eats after 5 or 6 o'clock, so it's been a while since I've eaten. And I noticed that I really didn't have that much desire to eat again the entire rest of the day. Now, I did end up snacking and having something small around 5 o'clock because I just wanted to. In fact, on one day I did it, though. I just ate it around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and didn't eat again the next day until noon. I had my little meal with my half-pound burger, and it probably fried down to much smaller than that. But what I noticed is that I felt very solid and very how would you put it? Almost fulfilled. I felt very like I just didn't need any nourishment, which is a very strange thing for me. I know that doesn't exist for me when I eat eggs. It doesn't exist for me when I have a vegetarian meal. I'm always hungry or need something a few hours later, but it was a completely different feeling. So this got me thinking that maybe it's dose related. Maybe it's not only just the quality of the meat, and I'm buying really high quality, by the way, or that there's something else to it. And I do know that meat has a much different energy than, say, fish or chicken or turkey or any of these things. In fact, back in the early 90s when I got involved with one of my first spiritual practices that I did and was learning healing, they had a 3 or 4 year program by which people that would get involved in this program would change their diet over a period of years. And that first year was the year that you gave up red meat. You had to give up pork right away. By the way, pork is probably the most, as far as blocking your energy that moves around your body, it's the dirtiest food energetically. This is why certain religions have always kind of been against pork and certain other products related to that. So you get rid of pork right away, but in the next year, you're supposed to phase out all beef. And then the year after that, you phase out all chicken, all turkey. The year after that, you're still eating fish. You phase that out. And so the fourth year, you're down to where they allow you to eat eggs and pretty much a vegetarian diet. So in their view, and I learned this to be true from practicing and doing this healing techniques, that it's denser, thicker energies of these foods that transfer that energy to your energy body. And when you're doing certain spiritual practices and moving energy and doing healing work and meditating all the time, these things tend to cause more problems than lighter vegetarian foods. And so I know there's a big difference. And so in this little experiment of mine, though, I went right for the red meat. I skipped over the turkey and the chicken. In fact, I'm not even going to try turkey or chicken. Last time I had chicken, I broke out in hives all over my entire body. And that was clear back in the 90s. I've had it once since probably 1980. And that was the time I broke out in hives, and I have not had it since. And so now I'm into this experiment, and I'm going all gung-ho, so I'm right into the red meat. And I've noticed now that I did the dose that I felt completely different. So then I thought, well, maybe I'm just going to go get something fresh and see if there's a difference in that. I want to see, I'm in the experiment now anyway. I've had 3 weeks now where I've had meat, one meal, probably 2 to 3 times in that week. And And, I get a little paranoid after I do it. So the next day I just eat all vegetarian, and then I eat as clean as I can for a couple of days, like it's going to purge my system or something, because, it's a little strange for me. And so now I'm going to try something fresh. So I go out and shop and I find some grass-fed lamb steak. So I get this idea, I'm going to make a stew, right? So I take it home and I make a stew. And I just decide to make kind of a lamb curry with onions and a few carrots and a lot of celery, things that are low glycemic. And I get it all sauteed together, and then a little bit of water, and then I add some spices, curry powders, cumin, different things like that, some turmeric, all these different spices to it. And then I ended up adding a can of coconut milk. And I have to tell you, that was one of the best tasting things I have eaten in the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm not a meat eater. And I have to tell you, when I sat down and ate that bowl, and I tried to figure it out because I took this steak and I tried to cut it in exact size pieces, which was really a chore because, it's not like I have knives laying around the house that I could cut meat with, right? My knives have been cutting broccoli for 10 years. And they don't need to be that sharp to cut broccoli and carrots and onions and things like that. It's a whole different game when you got a fresh piece of meat laying there and you're trying to cut it. And so, but I got it done, and I got it in this bowl, and I made this stew, and I let it cook for 2.5, 3 hours. And I sat down, and I was hoping that it would be edible, chewable, because, it's hunks of meat, right? It's not ground up like a patty. One of the reasons I bought the hamburger meat to begin with, that form, that ground up, was that it would be easy to chew, and it would be easy to actually get down, So I sat down. I didn't know what was going to happen with this, but when I sat down and tasted it, it just melted in my mouth. And I have to admit that it was one of the best tasting dishes I've had in years. And the other thing that was really fascinating about it was that I felt so good after eating that. And again, it was one of those meals where I didn't feel like I needed to eat the whole rest of the day. I just felt solid. And by the way, just so you know, I did this other experiment at the same time. I went to the gym to lift weights. And because I knew I was going to be eating this stew, I lifted a lot more weights than I normally do. I just tried to push myself to really wear myself out. And then I went and ate this meal, thinking meat, muscles, build muscles, big meat, right? So anyway, I went home and had this bowl of stew, and I have to admit, I felt sustained the whole day. I felt so grounded and so much more in my body. And this is the thing that I noticed when I had this, is that I feel more in my body. In other words, I feel solid. I feel like my whole body felt solid. I felt like after the next day, when I had it again, because, obviously I had some left over, I had it again, I just felt so much more like my body grew a little bit from the workout and the combination of actually eating meat. Now, and I have noticed this too, on the days that I do it and I work out, I tend to weigh a couple pounds more than normal. It's like my body goes through an automatic growth spurt from having this that I don't get out of my vegetarian or my lacto-avo days or even my pescatarian days. I just don't have the same feeling, and it seems like my body really likes it, which is kind of scaring me. And so that's my little foray into eating meat. I haven't had it now for about 10 days, and I'm back to just eating my regular diet with fish. But then, I've met some people that I've talked to about this, and I met another guy who's been a vegetarian most of his life, but now he's got a really hard job, and he's in his 60s, and he just says that he started eating meat just like I was trying it, because he just doesn't feel like he can make it through the day. He's got a really hard physical job, and when he has some meat, he just feels like he can keep up. And so when he's not working on the weekends, he's back to his vegetarian diet. And then when he's heavily engaged and working along, because he works sometimes 14 hours in a day, he has to have some meat. So it's very fascinating. You know, and we got into this discussion about blood types. And I don't know if anybody remembers this book, Eating Right for Your Blood Type, which was famous back in the 90s, I think it was. And basically, he described people as different blood types require different foods. And my blood type, by the way, is O. And O's are strictly meat eaters. O's are supposed to thrive on eating certain types of meat. And they're supposed to feel the best when they eat meat and limit certain vegetables, limit grains, limit beans, things like that. And so that's a little bit fascinating to me. So according to that book, I'm eating normally a diet that's completely wrong for me. And so, interesting. I don't know if I buy into it completely, but there might be some truth to that, because I have to say now that I've upped the amount of this protein I eat at one time, I've noticed I can tell why people love it so much, and why especially people that have very hard physical jobs love it so much, because I've never eaten anything that made me feel so sustained and so satisfied and different, and how even my body just felt different when I was eating that. And so now I have a really strange diet. There's days when I'm eating vegan. There's days when I'm eating vegetarian. There's days that I eat where I'm pescatarian. And then there's days where I'm just a carnivore. And so I'm trying to justify all this in my mind. I'm trying to sit down, and still in my mind, I'm thinking about it as a medicine. And I think I'm going to give another try this week and go out and try the lamb steak again and make something and see how it feels eating the entire thing. It's usually the steaks are about 1 pound. I'm going to consume it in 2 days, meaning a half pound at a time, once a day, 2 days in a row, and see how I feel on it. And then I'm just going to decide what to actually do after that. And so my little experiment here is going to get extended a little bit longer. At the same time, I don't really feel good looking at that piece of meat and knowing that it was an animal that got killed and I'm going to consume it. I don't really feel good thinking about the fact that I'm cooking this piece of flesh and then I'm actually going to cook this animal and consume it, right? But I do know that I feel really good once I've actually consumed it. And what's more important here? I do know that I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of things going on in my life I have to take care of. And so would it be better to put up with a little dietary change and take care of all my responsibilities, or to eat a cleaner, so-called healthier diet and lag behind? You know, and it reminded me of something that I've noticed also on another food, which, you know, they talk about in the health field all the time, is soy products. I used to be a huge consumer of tofu and soy, but, you know, I noticed something years ago. I hardly ever consume it now, although I like the taste of it. But the reason I don't consume it is because I noticed that I don't get anything out of it. I don't feel better when I eat it. I don't feel energized when I eat it. I don't even feel satisfied when I eat it. And aren't all those things the reasons why you should be eating food? And so I just wanted to talk about eating meat, eating vegans in particular, because all animals are vegans, and looking at diet from a different perspective in my little experiment here. I'm sure I'm going to probably come back to this topic sometime in the future. But right now, I just want to throw this idea out there. Are you eating a particular diet because you think it's who you are, or that it's part of your personality? Are you consuming a particular diet because you read somewhere that it's healthier for you and you'll have less health problems if you consume that diet? Are you eating a particular diet because you belong to a group of friends that all eat the same way and it's become like a religion for you? And this gets back to my other question, which I asked at the beginning of this podcast, is what would you eat if nobody knew what you were eating? What would you eat if you never had to tell anyone what you actually consumed as food? If no one could ever see you eat and no one could ever know anything that you consumed, what would you actually consume? So this comes back to a question of how much of our eating habits and behaviors are because we think it's good for us, how much of it is because of peer pressure, how much is of it just because we want to belong to a certain group or impress certain people or feel that we just know more than other people about certain subjects. So all these questions are questions that I'm dealing with right now because once this podcast ends, in about an hour or so when my stew is done cooking, I'm going to have another carnivorous meal. And I'm going to make a few notes on how I feel after that and take it from there. So thanks for tuning in. This is Roger with HerbWorks.